Hello, Amber.
Hey, Jen, and welcome to the Morally Great Babes podcast. I'm so excited for today's book because it happens to be Jen's five-star read. You can't see her, but she's happy dancing. So today we are going to cover Naked in Death by J.D. Robb, and this is a number one New York Times best-selling in death series, like the first novel in this series. And this series, which I was like flabbergasted, is 60 something books. It's insane. She's still giddy. But before
I've been reading it since 1995 in July when it first released.
Welcome to Morally Gray Babes. We're your hosts, Jen and Amber, two unapologetic book addicts diving deep into the steamiest reads, hottest book boyfriends, and those spicy moments that make you blush.
Amber here, and we're not just here to talk plot twists and character arcs. We're breaking down everything from our favorite quotes to the spice levels that really bring the heat.
Expect a lot of laughs, a little cussing, and some seriously hot takes. Whether we're gushing over fictional men or dishing out the truth on what books deserve the hype, nothing is off limits.
So buckle up, Buttercup, and get ready for real, raw, and totally unfiltered book talk. Because we're the book besties you didn't know you needed.
That's insane. That's insane. So first off, I want to say that on this podcast, we discuss various book boyfriends and juicy book recommendations. And if you're curious which book boyfriend would claim your heart and maybe your soul, take the Morally Gray Babes book boyfriend quiz and find out whether you're swooning for a possessive alpha, a broody bad boy, or a morally black anti-hero like yours truly. Our quiz will match you with your ultimate fictional soulmate. And if you're ready to find your match, the links in the bio are down in the show notes.
I want to say one thing before you go over the blurb.
Fantastic.
And that is what most people may not know is the Naked in Death series. So everything is in death. The first book is Naked in Death. So it's real hard to remember each book, especially after 60 plus of them. The other thing that most people don't know is that it's written by J.D. Robb, which is actually Nora Roberts. And
Is
I
it
will
really?
read in just Yes, it's Nora Roberts.
I had
So
no idea.
I'll read her author's note that goes into like the details on that, which I really I got to uncover information from her that I didn't read the first time. So I'm very excited.
I will say before getting into this blurb that I was highly reluctant to read this book.
They have like 2 or 3 different covers from over the years.
The cover, and I totally judged the book by the cover. I'm saying it. I did. I'm not proud of it, but it was like a short, compact. It wasn't like the typical standard book size. It was like smaller, like more rectangle.
Fits in your purse. Yep. That was the 90s, Amber.
That is true. And then like the person on the back, I thought it was like the lead detective in the series because she has this short brown hair, brown eyes, leather jacket, and I was like, is this what this is going to be about? Like, is this the main character, the female main character? And Jim was like, no, Amber, that's the author.
Because it was a picture from the 90s.
Yes, I get it. And then when I read the blurb, I was like, oh my gosh, this is giving me kind of like that TV series Castle vibes with like the detective Beckett and obviously the author Castle, who's the main characters. And I liked the series in the beginning, the TV series. I know we're not talking about TV series.
And by the way, that TV series started in 2009.
Yes.
So it could have been sort of loosely based on this book. You don't even know.
Dude, I Googled it, and there are some people that say that this book, that TV series was loosely based off of this series. And I was like, I can totally see it, even though the heroine in our series that we're going to be discussing is more of a badass than Kate Beckett. I said it. Kate Beckett kind of like over the series, she kind of just like turned into a mushball, and I wasn't for it. And that's when I stopped watching it. Anyway, let's go into this. If it wasn't for Jen pushing me to read this, because this is her 5-star.
Well, let's put it out there why. So I am going to be reading her 5-star Psycho Shifters.
Yes.
And she now got to read my book series, favorite series of all time.
Let's
So
just say I'm the best friend that will go first on the sword, right? Because I'm reading yours first. And it was real. I was so surprised. Anyway, if it wasn't for Jen, and I am part of a community which is for veterinarian moms who read books. It's very niche specific. And I put in there, like, who is your book boyfriend? So many women said Rourke. And I was like,
oh,
who is this Rourke character? And they were like, oh, it's in the Death series, in Death series,
in
by
depth
J.D.
series.
Robb. I was like, oh, J.D. Robb sounds like a man writing it. I don't know. And then they were like, it's 60 books. I was like, 60 freaking books? I don't know. Like, everything was like going against me reading this book. And I have to say, I loved it.
It's a romance book, like secondary.
Yes.
I think firsthand, it's a crime or a detective book. And Rourke was an Irish thief, now billionaire. He owns something like 20% of the
28%
world or something.
of-
Yeah, 28% of the world. He is a morally gray character. And she's very black and white. So I loved that push and pull through them. And they both had horrific childhoods, which was really hard to read. And it only played a role for her childhood. But as you go through the series, you discover his, and it was traumatic as well.
Yeah. I liked how okay, let's just talk about it. I'll give the blurb first.
Yes.
And this is my blurb. It's not the blurb on the back of the book. So we just thought to do a little bit differently today. But this is a gripping tale of justice, secrets, and unlikely connection. So, in a future where technology reigns supreme and murder is almost a thing of the past, homicide detective Eve Dallas, who is not on the back of the book cover, just letting you know, takes on a chilling case. It's the brutal murder of a high-profile woman with ties to power and scandal. Eve's sharp instincts lead her into a dark world of secrets, where every clue uncovers more than just the killer's motive. It reveals the tangled web of human vulnerability. Enter Rourke. Swoon. A billionaire with charm as disarming as his past is mysterious. Drawn together by a shared hunger for justice and undeniable chemistry, their partnership becomes as intriguing as the case itself. With danger lurking at every corner, Eve must decide if she can trust the enigmatic Rourke, even as her heart begins to betray her mind. Naked in Death delivers a suspense, sizzling tension, and a heroine who's unapologetically badass. Perfect for readers who crave a mix of sharp wit, raw emotion, and an electrifying mystery that keeps you guessing until the final page. Ba-ba-bum.
You actually guessed who it was before.
Yeah. So there's this string of murders, right? And it's basically, it says, like I said, it was a high profile woman because she's kind of like the catalyst of these series of murders. And when she was murdered, I messaged Jen. I was like, I know who did it. I was like, I got this. I got this. And then whenever they said the second murder, I was like, I know what's going to happen. It was good because, like, I think I had like 40 pages left of the book and it went down a different way. And I was like, oh my God, maybe I am wrong. And I was like, no, I'm right. And then it's like, it solidified it at the very end. And I was like, that's good. It was really good. I would say you were spot on, though. There was not, we'll talk about spice. Read the author's note because I think that helps.
The author's note is really intriguing. So here's Nora Roberts, who has probably written over 200 books, I think, romance books. Your typical romance, right? Boy meets girl, they can't be together for some reason. They get together, there's some craziness, and then they end up happily ever after. Like that's her normal. And it's kind of nice to read those on occasion because you just know it's going to end well. And sometimes you need that type of book, right?
This is my first Nora Roberts book. I've never like I've
You probably would not like her other books. This one is more snarky and more this is more your
my sister, my late sister, she was a big Danielle Steele fan and a big Nora Roberts, and I was just like, how could you read that? Like those are not my type. So if you would have told me this was Nora Roberts, I probably would have
You wouldn't have read it. I know.
dug my heels more, which is
This
so
is why
sad.
I didn't say anything.
It's so sad. And there's nothing against her or her writing because I felt this writing was
Yeah.
superb. It was just
It gets a lot of women in books, I will say.
it does. It's just whenever you have like kind of like a history of those books, like my sister read those books, right? And she had like a certain thing that she liked, and that's not my type of books that I like. So I would never want to read the books that she would have read.
Yeah,
So had you told me that, I would have dug my heels. But I'm very glad you didn't tell me.
I know.
It was so good. So if you're like, I don't want to read any Nora Roberts book, you're gonna eat your words.
So this book was in July of 1995. By that point, I think Nora Roberts had written hundreds of books still. Like, so she has her formula. She's one of those formulaic type authors that it's like, you know what you're going to get when you read it, which that part I really like. So this is her author's note. Years ago, a character came to me completely out of the blue that had never happened before and hasn't happened so distinctly since. But there was a dark, damaged, difficult woman, a homicide cop. And while she pulled at me, she didn't fit into anything that I had been writing at the time. And I remember thinking, aren't you fascinating? I'm so sorry I can't do anything for you. When I had an opportunity to take a pseudonym, I told my editor and agent that I had this character unlike any I'd ever written and wanted to give her a story. I planned Naked in Death as my first in a trilogy, because that's what she's known for, is her trilogies, of police procedures set in the near future. So 2058 is when it's set. So it's futuristic. They talk about tubes of soda because they don't have cans anymore. Like it was kind of hard when you start reading it, and now it's kind of like expected. Like she goes into the gym and I'm like, oh, what's going to be in a future gym? Like that, not this book, but in other books. So I really love that piece. She said, okay, I know I love this book. With Eve Dallas, that dark, damaged cop as a center, she is driven and antisocial with her job as her focus, and her former partner and reformed grifter she once busted as the only people she considers friends. I needed a contrast and a complement to Eve and her world, and Rourke fit the bill. He had his own damaged dark place masked by success, and here was Eve, self-made, abrupt, and single-minded, and there was Rourke, also self-made with charm and manners to spare, and even more fun. He basically owned the world, which meant little to nothing to Eve. Mainly, it annoyed her. Through the course of writing Naked in Death, I got to know each of these characters, their secrets, their stories, and they grew through that process. The plan for the trilogy was to explore their relationship as well as solve cases beyond a single book. By the time the third book, Immortal in Death, went to press, I became deeply attached to the characters and the world that they lived in. Most importantly, I knew that they had many more stories to tell, and I jumped at the chance to explore a marriage between two such different and yet so interconnected people. So here we are, 25 years and 49 books later. So she wrote this after she had done 49 books. It's been a challenge and a delight to chronicle the evolution of these two core characters and the others who inhabit this world. While I focus on one book at a time, I know they still have so many more stories to tell. That's why, other than staying true to the world and the characters I created, I look forward and not back. It isn't until I hold the finished book or someone mentions the length of the series that I think, wow, this has been some big run. And then I tap Eve and Rourke and the rest of the gang, and together we figure out what's next. I've read every single book except her most recent release, which I'm trying to figure out how I can fit it in because I love these books so much. Yeah.
I did not read the author's note.
So I did in 95, there was no author's
Oh,
note.
yeah.
That's why I thought I didn't read it, but it turns out it was later. Um,
I think
I also read somewhere online, so I'm not sure if it's accurate, but I'm going to put it out there because I read it. And again, I don't know if this came from the author. I don't know if this is accurate, but it feels that way. I have been so hoping for them to have a baby after 60 something books. And what I read was something that she was never going to have kids, that she was never going to write them having kids. And so I don't know if
you
that's
kind
true or
of gave
not.
it away. Did they end up together? Dude.
Well, I mean, they talk about him so much and there's 60 books with both of
I
them.
know.
I mean, that's not it's not too big of a giveaway on this book.
So, yeah, I didn't read the author's note. I think I glanced it to see what year this book was written in, because like when you start it, you don't know it's the year 2058.
Correct.
I like how like while you're reading, they referenced to certain like wars that take place in like 2016, and then like something that happened, guns that or weapons that were used in like 2020, like 30, and I'm like, yeah, okay.
Talking about the mass murders.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was just
I mean, how would she know that
yeah,
in our 20s
it was
that
just
it would be so deadly?
a lot of the things that she predicted for us to have in the future, I thought were entertaining and sometimes sad.
Well, and it's 2058 that it's
Mhm.
set in,
So we have
and we're
30
in
years.
2024. So that's a good 10 years. You never know.
10 years is 30 years.
I mean, 30 years.
I was like, huh, home slice. I thought it was interesting to see that. So there is a dedication. She quotes two people. One is William Shakespeare and one is Rap Brown, right? So William Shakespeare is What's Past is Prologue, which I thought was really it was prologue was something that was a word that was used in like in our household recently by one of my twins. So we have twins. They're 11. I'm going to be honest. I think when I was 11, I did not know what a prologue was. Let's be real. And our son was saying something and he was like, "Oh, mom, it's in the past. It's a prologue." And I was like, "What?" I was like, "What is happening?" My son
Good job homeschooling, Mom.
no, but like, but it was just so random. And then like I read this and I was like, "What's past this prologue?" And I showed it to my hubster, and he was like, "I didn't know what prologue was when the kids were like when I was their age." And I was like, "That is so." The fact that it came up again, it was just kind of like, "Oh, I had to."
Wild.
Yeah, it was just very very wild. The second one I thought was very heartbreaking. It's like violence is as American as cherry pie.
True.
Dude, that hurts. It is true. And so those are the dedications. And I thought both of them were so well chosen for the book.
Agreed.
So
Agreed.
I
She
always,
does really good at that, I believe,
so
the
I read
author.
the dedications beforehand. And then after I read the book, I read the dedications again just to see. And sometimes it's like, this is for the dirty girls who needs like a hockey player with a filthy mouth and blah, 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 whatever. I'm
Yeah,
like, yeah,
which
yeah,
we love.
oh my God. Yeah, I love.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh yeah, that's good. And that's what you get. But these two, I thought they were so well chosen for the book and the story that she laid out.
Yeah.
Just my 2 cents.
Yeah.
We always go by nicknames next. So the only nickname was Rourke would just call her Lieutenant, right? And then one of the side characters, and he called her something else. What did he call her?
Darling Eve.
Darling Eve. But it wasn't that.
Which doesn't seem nickname-esque, but he says it through all the books, so it is.
He only said it once in this.
Maybe once, but it's now like prevalent in all the books, so it
No,
makes
he
yeah.
didn't say it. He didn't say it in this book. No. Because I made a note. I have it in here. He only calls her Lieutenant as anything else besides Eve.
Because he knows she's skittish and he doesn't want to scare her away.
And then one of the side characters calls her Lieutenant Sugar, which I thought was hilarious.
I love that. And I don't know if it was in this book now, but she calls him Ace on occasion,
Not
but
this
that's
book.
more of a term that she says to a lot of people. Like it's not just to him.
There was like literally no nicknames given to anybody except for
Yeah.
Lieutenant Sugar, and then just calling her Lieutenant, which is like actually her position. So,
Yeah.
and I feel like it's going to be hard for you to like recognize that because you've read all 60, right? So,
Exactly.
and that is that. What I have quotes, so I have quotes of like to indicate like their humor, their like when they declare their love and like her realization. So I have those quotes. But if you want to go into that, or do you want to just talk about what you loved about the book, Jen?
Yeah.
And I'll stop you.
I feel like my favorite parts of the book are Eve's personality. She's just a smart mouthed, no nonsense, just wants to do her job and wants to be left alone. Like, legitimately. Don't tell her what to do with her hair, with her clothes. Again, this is thinking of all the series right now. But what I loved the most is Rourke's intense like of her and the way that he like takes care of her. Like he'll she gets in her car and the heater's working when it wasn't working before because it's a police car and it takes forever to put in to get things fixed and all that kind of stuff. And she's not someone who would melt easily, her exterior easily, and he just went right in. And they just met. They just go together. I don't know how else to say that. And the way that he makes sure she eats, he makes sure she sleeps, he does not like her in pain. In future books and stuff, he's constantly saying, take a blocker for your headache because she gets headaches a lot. And I love it.
Reference
I love everything about it.
stay in the
Huh?
it's like don't reference other
I know, it's just so good.
Um, I liked the writing. I like the writing. I like the style, which I'm just again flabbergasted is the way to say it because like had I known this was Nora Roberts, I would not have thought that I would like the style as much. Which again, I have never read one of her books. I just know that my sister loves her books, and my sister and I don't typically have the same taste. So I love the writing. It's not in first person point of view, which is something that I love.
Yeah.
But I appreciated how she was able to switch from one character story to another seamlessly within a chapter. It kind of felt like you were watching a movie from like say Eve as the female main character, like you were watching her go through her life and then Rourke entered the picture and then all of a sudden you were following Rourke and hearing like seeing his point of view. I really enjoyed that aspect of it. And because nowadays it's like you read when you see like points of view in most books that we've been reading lately, it's like point of view, Eve, and it's I did this, and it's all internal dialogue. And it wasn't so much that. And I thought I would not appreciate it, but I did. I loved this style. I loved Eve's badassery. I loved how the author was able to take like her childhood trauma and she showcased it in a way, and I liked how I mean obviously I didn't like hearing her childhood trauma, like nobody wants to hear that or you know deal with their own, but I loved how she would bring it up and how Eve would handle it because I feel like that's a lot of ways that most people handle their trauma until it comes to a head, and so I felt like that was relatable. I loved I loved the side characters. And I know it's futuristic and I loved hearing little things that were added or different. Some things that, like you don't think they're going to happen. It's like watching Back to the Future, right? And you're like, "Ugh, that's not really true." But there was a couple of things that I was like questioning because I got like really confused. Like they got in the vehicle, but then he was like hovering over trees. And I'm like, is this a hovercraft or is it like a car? Like I had a hard time because it didn't say it was a hovercraft. It just said it was a car. So there was a couple of things like that was hard for me. But I loved Rourke's personality. I loved how he has trauma, right? And he deals with it. He truly embraces who he is. Eve is one person who has always been isolated, has always had to take care of herself, has never had anyone to take care of her in any way. She's always had to fight for what she had. And Rourke sees that in her and very slowly tries to break down her walls.
He's very, very patient.
He's very patient, yes, but whenever he thinks that there's a lack of trust, he immediately shuts down himself, and then he realizes, like, once they have like an understanding, like the I'm not big on miscommunication tropes. It's not my fave.
No.
So, but it lasted like 2 pages, I feel like, and it
Yeah, no, agreed.
and it just
Yeah.
felt like both of the characters were, well, maybe more Rourke than Eve. He was just emotionally mature enough to like recognize it and see it. And he didn't allow it to hinder their relationship moving forward. Like he actually wanted to pursue her despite that little hiccup. So I love that. I thought the
kind
storyline,
of kind of like eyes on the prize. He has his eyes on her as a prize, and he's going to make it happen.
yeah.
Love
So
it.
I loved the storyline. I thought it was really well done, and you could follow it. It was like reading an SVU episode. Like you were just like la la la. You were reading it. You're trying to guess who like the killer was, and I just thought it was really well done. And then even though I guessed who the killer was, within the first like 12% of the book, it was still really cool to see it all ironed out, even though there was parts of it that were challenging to read. I thought the storytelling was like top notch. Like I know
Uh,
like the characters are really good. Like you loved Rourke and Eve, and I just thought the storyline was like the writing was really good.
I it's really, let me gather my thoughts. He is, first of all, I listened to this book on Audible because I had a lot of editing work that I needed to do, and I couldn't read, but I wanted to like. And by the way, if you are an Audible lover, even if you're not an Audible lover, consider using Audible for this, because the woman that voices the book does his Irish accent, and it just brings it, it just gives you a little bit more. It kind of like actors in a movie that are a good pick. Do you know what I mean?
And
It
we are
was
not
really,
sponsored by Audible, so there you go.
we're not sponsored. We're not sponsored yet, Audible.
I'm like,
If you choose to change that, we're cool.
you said that, and I had two things. It's like one, we're not sponsored by Audible, and then two, I'm like, how do I get to be a voice narrator? Like that would
I,
be
me
phenomenal.
too. That's, I have
Some
always wanted to read
I will
like
do my
narrate a book.
I will do my best. So some of my quotes I loved is when Eve Dallas and Rourke's first kiss. Um, he says to her, "I want to see you again." He stopped, took her face in his hands. "I need to see you again." Her pulse jumped as if it had nothing to do with the rest of her. "Rourke, what's going on here?" "Lieutenant." He leaned forward, touched his lips to hers. "Indications are we're having a romance." I just loved it. And I forgot for like 68% of this book when I'm reading it that he was Irish, because they don't really harp on it at all. They make one note, and it's like when he was like from Dublin. Like they make one little comment 68% of the book. So the whole book, I was like, oh, he's, just has like a random American accent. And I was like, oh gosh, for someone to say that with like an accent, like an Irish accent, I'm like, hell yeah, we're having a romance.
It was an Irish accent in the book when it was
Ah,
read to me in Audible.
in a woman's voice.
So good. So good. And the only, oh, go ahead. So finish your,
No, that was mine.
or you said the
I mean,
quote. Okay.
I have
So
I have 1, 2, 3, 4 more.
I did Audible, so I only have one
Okay.
or two.
That's fine.
Yeah. So she does, it's very futuristic in that their computer systems or screens for police officers can run, which I think is so intriguing, can run probabilities from all the facts that you feed it and things like that. So she uses this machine to look up Rourke. And this is what it says. Rourke, no known given name. Born 10/6/2023. Blows my mind when I read that. Dublin, Ireland. ID number, blah, blah, blah. Parents unknown. Marital status single. President and CEO of Rourke Industries, established in 2042. Main branches: New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, Dublin, London, Bonn, Paris, Frankfurt, Tokyo, Milan, Sydney. Off planet branches: Station 45, Bridgerton Colony, Vegas 2, Freestar 1. Interests in real estate, import, export, shipping, entertainment, manufacturing, pharmaceuticals, transportation. Estimated growth work 3,800,000,000.
I like how you used quotes when you were saying it, like air quotes. Like nobody can see you but me.
I'm doing the quote.
It was so funny. I'm sorry. I just had to share that. But it just shows you how prestigious he is and how connected he is.
Yeah,
And he's
and
young.
how
Like,
and to come from nowhere, which you'll learn later on more, but to come from nowhere and have no parents, and be this successful is pretty unheard of.
I also one so they talk about the it's in the future. One thing I liked was like the humor in the book. There's like this lady, this old neighbor, and it's funny because her husband dies, and Lieutenant Eve goes to check it out, and they just make this like comment. I forgot the man's name, and she's like, "Oh, male, Caucasian, 115 years old." I'm like, "We're not going to address this. We're not going to address this." Like, and then this other lady dies, and she's like, "Oh, she's 58, so young." I'm like, "What the hell? Like, how old is old in the future?" Like, it totally took me back. But I loved the humor in the book, not the age, but the reason why like that old man died was hilarious to me. I mean, death is not hilarious. That's not what I'm saying. But when they explain exactly what killed him and how, it surprised me in a way, and I thought it was hilariously dark. I'll say that.
Yes.
And I was just like, "Oh, okay, well that's funny." I thought it was funny. I also thought that Eve had like a very dry humor, and I appreciate so much.
Very. And sarcastic.
And
Oof.
she's talking to her friend, whose name is Mavis, and she just tells her that she had sex with Rourke, right? Spoiler alert. So she goes, Mavis says, "You, Rourke." Eyes watering, Mavis reached out for more tissues. "Jesus, Eve. Jesus Christ, you never sleep with anybody, and you're telling me you slept with Rourke? That's not precisely accurate. We didn't sleep." Yes. I just thought that was so like, yeah, that's something that like that snark, dry humor is totally my
Mhm.
thing. I was like, yes, yes, please.
Here's my second and last quote. So she's still looking up Rourke, right? Because he's caught her interest. And so she wants to know his background, I guess. So she says, access Rourke Dublin. No additional data. Well, shit, Mr. Mystery. Description and visual. Rourke, black hair, blue eyes, 6 feet, 2 inches, 173 pounds. Eve grunted as her computer listed the description. She had to agree that in Rourke's case, a picture was worth a couple hundred words. His image staring back at her from the screen, he was almost ridiculously handsome. The narrow, aesthetic face, the slash of cheekbones and sculpted mouth. Yes, his hair was black, but the computer didn't say it was thick and full and swept back from a strong forehead to fall inches above broad shoulders. His eyes were blue, but the word was much too simple for the intensity of the color or the power in them. I mean, that's poetic.
It when you were reading it, his description, I had that horrible TikTok audio 6'5".
Me too.
It's like la la Rourke. So I was like, okay.
We're dancing here.
And it's not horrible. It's just horrible because it gets in like your head like a baby shark, like earworm. Like
Yes.
it just stays in your
Yep.
head, and you're like singing it. You're like, why am I singing this song? One of my so I'm only going to share two. I have like three written down, but I'm only going to share two. One is Rourke's declaration. He goes, "I like your style, Lieutenant Dallas," he said when they fought their way to the car. "I like it a lot. And by the way, I don't think I'm in love with you anymore. I know I am."
Just he knew a long time ago. He's just getting her warmed up to be able to listen to it.
He just gives her breadcrumbs.
Yeah.
It's so nice. And then this shows just a little bit of her wit. So she says, "Assaulting an officer will earn you 1 to 5, Rourke. That's in a cage, not cushy home detention. You're not wearing your badge or anything else for that matter." He gave her a friendly nip on the chin. "Be sure to put that in your report." It's like, oh, touche. I just
Oh.
it was really good. And here's the thing: is
And the way that he got into her heart is by sending coffee to her, which is crazy. But like in this day and age, in 2058, you
real
have fake
coffee,
coffee,
real
and he sent her real coffee. And someone's all like, basically, like, "Why are you not getting diamonds? Like this is ridiculous." And she smiles because that's exactly how you get to her. He knew it.
And the thing that I want to point out is that the romance between the two is not the story. Like
No, not
it's
at all.
it's just the breadcrumbs. And I know this is like a podcast where we share spicy reads and juicy details and scandalous and tropes and kinks. And this book, even though Rourke is a book boyfriend, right? And he's part of our book boyfriend advent calendar, and he's delicious and he's doing all the right things and there's 60 more books with him. The story is not them. They're just the underlying, like
Mhm.
they're like the little, like the current over
She
under the waves.
In the other books, he, just like in this book, he helps her with cases.
Yeah. Oh, fair enough. So
Yeah.
I know this is your favorite book, but we have to like give all the nitty gritty. Is there anything in this book one that you were irked or questioned?
Um, you pointed it out in terms of the point of view, right?
Yeah.
I haven't read this literally since 1995. So, when I first read it from the books that I was reading before, which were Nora Robert-esque and things like that, I loved it because it was
I
different and
liked
it
it.
was darker,
Yeah.
and it was darker and it was different than like the Nora Roberts. And so I immediately knew that I loved it. Now, having read all these other books that we read now, I thought when I first read it that it was like a 3 in spice. And now I think it's a
Oh
1.
God, no.
But
What?
I'm just saying, back then it was a 3
I
in
put
my
a
opinion.
green bell pepper spice. Like it's not even.
It's not even a 1.
No.
I put a 1.
Well, I put a one because they have to put something, but
Yeah.
um, yeah. There's not a lot of detail in the spice, so it's not a spicy book, I would say.
It's very much for almost made for TV. Like,
Yeah,
they get into bed and then they go to the scene for the next morning. Very much like that.
yeah. The only thing that ruffled my feathers, I mean, there was obviously the hovercraft. I didn't know he's hovering over trees. What? It's a car. Was there? He has a butler, I guess. That's his term. His name is Somerset, which just I feel like that makes me think of like a Jane Austen book for some reason.
Mhm.
Was it Sense and Sensibility? No, Pride and Prejudice.
Yeah, I think so. Oh, I don't know.
Oh, dude, now I'm gonna get in my head about this. I'll look it up later. So his name is Somerset, and he just is a grumpy turd knocket, like to her. Like he's just not nice. And I know she's crass and she's not like, the caliber that he's used to be associating with because he's this, I don't know, billionaire, owns 28% of the planet, doing business off planet. And I get it, but you don't have to be an ass about it. Like,
I can give you some insights
nope,
a little
nope,
bit.
don't tell me
No?
anything. I don't want to know.
No, I'm not telling you what's happening in future books.
I don't want to.
I'm not. Okay.
I want to discover him because he like ruffles my feathers.
Well, they did say something in the book.
He was really mean to her.
Keep in mind that he's of Rourke's former world, and they don't like police.
They didn't
Consider
mention
that.
that he was from the former world.
Mm,
They don't.
okay. Okay.
He just mentions that he was with him for a long time, and he's been with
Yes.
like they don't say where he picked him up or anything like that. So I just got very like meanie. That was the only thing. I just didn't like his attitude, and I get it, but there's always got to be something to ruffle your feathers.
Yeah, of
And
course.
for someone who is loyal,
He's her nemesis in this first book.
I wouldn't say he's a nemesis. He's just
Well,
like
she just he irritates her, and she irritates him. It's
well,
mutual.
the thing is like she doesn't understand what what crawled up his butt. Like whenever she's around, he's just like a turd nugget. And so she point blank asks him like, "What is your beef with me?" And he's like, "Basically, you're not same caliber as that he's used to associating with." And she was like, "Okay," like "F you," and then like leaves. Like she does nothing to him. It ruffled my feathers to be, and maybe there's some underlying childhood trauma there for me. I don't know, but it just like, you know how like people are say, oh, if you're triggered by that, there's something happening with you. I don't know, but it just ruffled my feathers that somebody could be so just rude, like blatantly rude to someone's face about their character. Like he knows nothing about her. Like, yes, she's crass and she's a cop, but obviously his employer loves her. So, dude, like bite your tongue a little bit better. So I also like how there's a pet in the book. So there's like a side pet. I love that. But yeah, we're gonna keep going. Spice level you said was a 1. I agree.
Yep.
Solid.
And it cracks me up that I would have rated it as a 3 back in 95. It just shows that what you read broadens your horizons. Because the book we just read before that, an Omegaverse. I mean,
I
just saying.
And I thought that a Megaverse was a 3. So that's also scary. So that's sad. So I gave this rating a solid 4-star. I thought it was a really great book. I loved the story. I loved the writing. I loved the changing of the views seamlessly by the author. I liked how the romance was just like an undercurrent for like the real detective case. And this is not a book I would have chosen. So I'm very grateful for you. And I'm grateful for the ladies in my veterinary DVM mom book club to suggest it.
It's a 5 for me. It was a 5 when I read it before. Now, if I read it before, it was a 5 when I originally read it. Today, I would probably rate it a 4.
Does that break your heart?
Yeah.
Kind of makes me not want to read Psycho Shifters.
Like, I want to read, like, yeah. Because I read all the books, and it's like the series is my top favorite series of all time.
Maybe the series is a 5, but the book is a 4, and that's okay.
Yeah, it's a 4 because it was the first one, blah, blah, blah. And it's a 4. I'm going to say it's a 4. The series is absolutely a 5.
I get that. Because like Psycho Shifters is a 5 for me, the series, but book 1 is not a 5.
Yeah. I will agree with that. And there's other books in the series that are full on 5s. So this one is a 4. Yeah.
Okay. Well, we'll have to read some more because I need to hear Somerset's story and I want him to apologize.
Yes. Thanks for tuning in, babes. If you loved hanging out with us today, don't forget to check the show notes for all the juicy details and the links. You can also join our chat for exclusive updates and behind the scenes goodies on our Instagram at Morally Babe.
And of course, follow us for more spicy reads, hot takes, and unfiltered fun. Until next time, stay morally gray.